What's the most insane thing a human has survived? Louis Zamperini survived over a month lost at sea in the South Pacific after his plane crashed into the ocean. He then got picked up by the Japanese Navy and survived a camp where many had been executed and tortured, starved, disease and malaria-ridden camp. He then was loaded into a overcrowded, overwhelmingly hot ship known by POWs as hell ships and transported to Japan, where he spent a while in camp, being specifically targeted and tortured because he was an Olympic athlete and an American. He survived all of that. Unbroken is the title of both the book and film, for anyone wishing to read more about him. William Rankin, a Marine pilot who on a flight from Massachusetts to South Carolina had engine failure which forced him to eject into a thunderstorm. He ejected at 6 p.m. was pounded by hailstones, had to hold his breath from being drowned by rain, and his parachute was struck by lightning. When he landed he looked at his watch and it was 6:40 p.m. There's a episode of The Dollop about it, pretty amazing. Holy duck, that's terrifying as hell. One teenager was sentenced to the electric chair and was the first and only person to survive it twice. He said it felt like his mouth was full of cold peanut butter during the shocks. Well, that is actually shocking. You're not wired right, are you? There are so many dead bodies on Mount Everest that it amazes me that anyone survives climbing it. There's a Dutch guy that did it in shorts and a guy without legs who did it. Here in Chile in 2010 a mine collapsed and 33 miners were trapped inside almost at 1 kilometer or 2,300 feet underground. They were there for almost 2 months, from beginning of August to middle of October. I remember watching the news and saying of course they are dead then. In one of the searching, they stuck a big machine, and when they pulled it out of the ground it had a little paper written in red ink, "We are fine. The 33 of us." And even better, they recruited them all. Here is the link cnn.com/2013/07/world/America/Chilean mine rescue/index HTML if someone is interested. Those rugby players who survived the plane crash in the Andes is still the craziest survival story for me, and even grimmer when you consider all the people who died and the fact that they had to resort to cannibalism. Sometimes I think the phrase triumph of the will is too casually thrown about, but it definitely applies in that situation. The thing I find crazy about it is mountain climbing experts tried to see what path they took on the mountains, but couldn't, and every path that they did try was impassable. One Japanese man, Tsutomu Yamaguchi, survived Hiroshima and Nagasaki. I can't decide if he has incredibly good luck or incredibly bad. Neither can he. There are people in India who survive acid attacks. I don't live there, but I heard and seen the effects. Not the most, but pretty good. A man was being attacked by a bear and he remembered hearing that bears have bad gag reflexes, so he shoved his hand in the bear's mouth and grabbed juvenile, I think that's what it's called, and lived on. That is insane. There was that one guy who had a railroad spoke driven through his face. He was pretty ducked up though. Some mad lad survived getting throat slitted by a skater in ice hockey. Clint Malarkuk had both his carotid and jugular sliced open. Kept playing for 7 years afterward. 2. Aaron Ralston link. Wikipedia. org/wiki/Aaron_Ralston. He survived several days without food and drinking his own piss after his arm got caught against a wall by a rock in a climbing accident. He then amputated his own arm, no anesthesia, and was able to escape the canyon and found help. According to my dad, someone he knew went skydiving, but the parachute didn't work, so he fell a couple thousand meters, landed in a tree and survived. Just recently, 101-year-old WWIIN Spanish flu survivor just beat COVID-19. What a badass. I met a guy once who had gotten shot in the face. He was paralyzed, but was still all there mentally. A 3-year-old girl survived after being under freezing cold water for 66 minutes. There's a handful of stories of people who were caught in the first explosion from Mount St. Helens in 1980 and somehow survived. Most of them are pretty amazing. Campers or foresters that were caught by surprise when it erupted and either got away by the skin of their teeth or somehow survived to get picked up by rescue crews. There was a family of 4 that got caught in the initial blast and managed to ride it out in a rotted out shed of all things. They somehow survived another 2 days on whatever food they had with them before a rescue chopper picked them up. You ever see the pictures of the blown down forests surrounding the mountain? The fact that anyone survived that at all is nothing short of a miracle. Not sure if it's true, but a woman went skydiving and her parachute didn't open. She used her backup but it only opened 1/3 of the way. She fell 10,000 feet into a bullet ant hill. The ants bit her, and the poison from the ants clotted her blood, making her survive. She broke both her legs and arms, all her ribs, and a lot of other bones. There's a woman who survived a hit of a meteorite. Dinosaurs violently taking notes. Frame Selleck survived a train crash, a plane crash, a bus accident, 2 car fires, another bus accident, and a car accident with a truck. Then he won lottery. Luckiest man alive according to some journalists. A girl, she was 15, hitchhiking and got picked up by an old dude. He went the wrong way and stopped off the side of the road, hit her over the head, tied her up, and raped her most of the night. Next morning he cuts off both her arms and throws her over a 30-foot cliff. Somehow she's still alive. She packed mud on her arms to stop bleeding, spends all day getting back up the cliff, and walks for 3 miles until someone finally finds her. She had lost half her body's blood. My god. A man severed his leg just below the hip with a chainsaw, and not only did he survive, but he barely needed surgery because the heat of the chainsaw closed off all his blood vessels and burned off his nerve endings. Sounds like a more violent lightsaber. One man survived both atomic drops on Japan. Some man I can't remember the name of fell onto a drill bit that was 1.5 inches wide. His name is Ron Hunt. Only one person has ever survived a firing squad. 5 bullets plus 1 at close range to the head. A nurse by the name of Violet Jessup survived the sinking of both the Titanic and Britannic, sister ship to the Titanic. Frame Selleck survived a train that fell into a river, got launched out of an airplane, got thrown into a river again, but this time on a bus. His car exploded, and his car got hit by a bus which exploded again. Then he freaking won the lottery. Watch Salmonella's video on the same. It's unbelievably inane. I read that in Guinness World Records of 1999, a guy was struck by lightning 4, I think, times, and then he killed himself. I don't remember why. That girl that survived a blown up airplane and fell 30,000 plus feet back in the 60s/70s and had just a broken bone or so. There was a test pilot flying an SR-71 Blackbird at I think Mach 2 and the place disintegrated around him. He passed out and awoke falling from the sky. I believe he thought he was dead as there was no way he could survive that event. He did however, and I think he was barely injured. I think he survived, but later drowned in the ocean. Trump's health advice. I once bonched a bucket with presidential kush on it. I was ducking spinning. The story of Ludger Silberus is nuts. This fellow survived a volcanic eruption and pyroclastic flow that killed everyone else in his city. It killed an estimated 30,000 people and wiped out the city of St. Pierre in 1902. Only this guy and one other, who was on the very edge of the flow, survived. Inside the flow, everyone else was burned alive or suffocated. How did he live? Simple, he was thrown in jail after a fight and was put into solitary. His cell just happened to be super isolated, partly underground, with no windows. It had just a small vent for air. He was partly roasted nonetheless, but by pissing on his clothes and stuffing them in the vent, he lived. 4 days later, rescuers found him. He eventually went on to a career of displaying himself for cash with the Barnum and Bailey Circus as the man who lived through doomsday. Link. M. Wikipedia. org/wiki/ludger_Silberis. Read that one. Amazing. 50 sneezes. One after the other after the other after the other. Falling from a 9-story high building into shark-infested waters when tripping over a rail after sightseeing. I don't know if this is real or not. Tell me if it isn't. Some water-based cooling system in an astronaut suit once broke, so water went into the astronaut's helmet and he almost drowned, but he could make it to the space station in time, so he could take off his helmet and survived. I met someone that survived the COVID quarantine without the use of any video games. Ha. JK. Such a badass does not exist. It's impossible. A cannonball to the stomach. Frank Richards survived a direct cannonball blow to the stomach. Frain Selick survived a lot. I literally searched man who survived everything, and he was the first result. He's not alive now, but Jeremy McGill survived, being mauled by elephants in rural China. The attack broke his back and made his organs squirt out of his body to such a point that he could reach inside himself. Took him a year or two to recover, and those are some of the worst scars I've seen. He actually died peacefully at home, if y'all believe that. Andreas Mahavec survived 18 days with no food or water when he was thrown in jail and forgotten about. Rabies almost always has a 100% CFR, but a handful of people have survived it. I'd say that's pretty crazy. 2 lightning bolts at the same time. I'm gonna say falling out of an airplane. There are 4 documented cases of people who could get the electric chair and survive unharmed and healthy. Free falling from the edge of space. Humans evolved in rainforest jungles and lakes, but 30,000 survived near complete collapse of the Earth's environment. One guy survived being struck by lightning 7 times. I think he committed suicide. The Remnant is loosely based on a true story. A guy really was mauled by bear and left for dead, and he had to make it back to civilization alone, severely injured. Tom Cruise was so good in The Remnant. The baby that was found after a tornado that destroyed the family's house that was found hanging in a tree a Luan way. Totally unharmed. He was hanging by the back collar of his onishi he had on. Timex made a watch ad featuring him as someone who takes a licking but keeps on ticking. This was in the 80s maybe? Being a captured slave. Like imagine getting taken from your land shipped to another country and being forced to work and beaten if you don't. Tragic. Bill Weaver and Jim Swayer having a blackbird disintegrate around them at Mach 2 or something comes to mind. A woman was hiking and got attacked by a bear. It pinned her down and swiped half her face off, including an eye. She, in turn, gouged the bear's eyes out with her thumbs and escaped. She wrote a book about it. In my opinion, the fact that we have people on space is the most insane thing that humans survive regularly. The rugby plane crash of 1972. A plane with rugby players crashed into the Andes Mountains after several weeks of realizing that no one was coming to save them and not wanting to keep eating the corpses of the dead. Of them traveled across the Andes Mountains to get help. The thing that makes this so crazy is that mountain climbing experts tried to take the same path that they did, but couldn't find a clear path and failed. There was a story of a fella who was in his trailer when a tornado decided he did not need to be there anymore. So during the relocation process he bashed his head on something and went night night. Because of that his body completely relaxed. When the tornado placed him in his new spot he was fine. I believe it was pretty damn far too. No real injuries to speak of at all. The man that survived Hiroshima and Nagasaki. The man that survived being struck by lightning 7 times. And the man that survived 70 something days out at sea on an emergency raft. Childbirth. Hopefully 2020. Black Death, Black Plague, Coronavirus, AIDS, HIV, Mount Everest, the rugby players from the movie Alive, etc. A 90-degree University of Florida football game sitting in the nosebleeds. Jos Salvador Alvarenga survived 438 days on ocean drinking only his own piss and blood of turtles and eating fishes and birds which he had to catch by hand. He traveled from Mexico to Marshall Islands. He traveled nearly 11,000 kilometers, nearly 8,000 miles. He traveled with a friend who gave up and stopped eating during the voyage. He said that several container ships, but they didn't do shit. He even said that they waved at him. Then he had in the court that he didn't eat his friend. Phineas Gage. His skull was penetrated by an iron rod which caught the exact middle of the big brain. He had barely survived, but damn. Truman Duncan was hit by a train in 2008, and his body was split in half. He had 23 operations and miraculously survived. He is still alive today. I saw this man who got attacked by a bear and he tore him apart. His whole face was destroyed. You couldn't even see his human shoulder die from the amount of blood he lost. The doctor saved him and fixed his face. Looked like nothing really happened to him. Death. I think there was a skydiver whose parachute failed, resulting in them crashing into the ground. The only reason they survived is the fact that they landed on a mound of fire ants, and the stings gave them just enough adrenaline to keep them alive. So unlucky. It's super lucky. My ex. Nicolas Gage survived a metal rod being blown through his chin and out his skull. He was packing explosives into a hole to blow away rock. The explosives were faulty and went off and through the rod he used through his head. Imagine the headaches. He survived, and when studied by a doctor, he was shown to be unable to make proper choices. Not sure how to explain, because I read a book on him a long time ago. Apparently the doctor offered him money for some rocks, and he said no, even though the rocks were worthless. Math class. Being alive. I'm a lifeguard and we rescued a 14-year-old girl which was underwater for over an hour and she survived with nearly none permanent damage. Hey, thanks for watching and don't forget to subscribe.